Hey guys, and welcome to this video. Today I'm gonna show you a technique for shading in a drawing, which is in this case a white rose, using a black pen, black crayon, a pencil, charcoal and a brush. If you've got no charcoal at hand, you may use the pencil instead. But be aware that with charcoal it's a little bit easier to create soft or light shadows due to its buttery consistency. Like every other tutorial of mine, this one is meant for everybody, no matter what stage of drawing skills you are at. So, first of all, let's take a look at the different levels of darkness or intensities of our drawing utensils. As you can see, the black pen is the darkest, followed by black crayon. The pencil represents the next, even lighter level, and the charcoal the lightest or softest of all. And according to that order, we're gonna build up our shading by starting with the shadows and their darkest parts, and working our way upwards, so to say, towards the brighter parts. The approach is always the same. Draw a layer with the black pen, representing the darkest part. Then we put a layer of black crayon over the pen's edges, where we put most pressure on the crayon, as well as directly next to it, where we put increasingly less pressure on the crayon, the further we move away towards the light. Next, take the pencil and put a layer of it on the crayon's edges as well as directly next to it in the same way. And if you've got charcoal at hand, do the same with the charcoal too. But before you do so, go over the pencil part with your brush and try to smoothen it out. If you don't have charcoal, just drag the pencil out a little bit further and try to let it fade out as softly as possible, by putting only the tiniest amount of pressure on it towards the end. Last but not least, take your brush and try to smoothen everything out as much as possible, especially the color transitioning parts. You can even use the excess amount of charcoal or from your pencil on your brush to make the softest part blend into the white paper. Well done guys, now you've already mastered the basic concept of shading. Because essentially, shading is all about creating dark and light areas to bring a drawing to life. Now on to our motif. I began sketching out where shadows would be cast on our white rose, which might be especially helpful for beginners just to make sure that you're getting the shadows' shapes and locations right. Once you've accomplished that, pick a rose petal to begin with. We will just be working on the shadows right now, as well as we will do with several other petals, before shading them in completely. Why, you might ask? Well, I've made the experience that if you don't create somewhat of an overview and don't set the shadows and their different intensities in relation, by at least roughly filling them in, you'll focus too much on single areas, so that in the end, the overall picture won't look as you've anticipated. So, like I've just said a moment ago, start with the darkest color, which is in this case the black pen, because this shadow is gonna be pretty deep, meaning that its darkest part is gonna be pitch black. Go over the darkest part of the shadow, which is right at its bottom. Then take the black crayon and place it on the edges of the area we've just blackened out. From there on, follow the shadow's pre-drawn shape by dragging the black crayon further up. Keep in mind to put more pressure on the crayon where it should be darker, which is where the black pen turns into black crayon, and less where it should be brighter, being the nearer you get towards the shadow's end, so to say, where it fades out. Next, I use the pencil to fill in the remaining parts of the shadow. Again, apply more pressure on the darker parts, which is right where the rose petal grows out from the upper one and where the crayon turns into pencil. Then I use the black crayon to intensify the shadow around the other petal's edge. Last but not least, take your brush and smoothen everything out. Remember that the way and direction you move the brush influences the shadow's shape. Go slightly over the shadow's edges to make it blend in more with the brighter parts of the petal. And it's totally fine to intensify the shadow here and there, as I did. It's better to make it too light than too dark, since you can always make a shadow darker, whereas it's quite difficult to get it lighter again. Then I worked on the next petal's shadow. However, with this one, I didn't use the black pen but chose the crayon as darkest color, since this shadow won't be as deep as the other one, so its darkest part won't be as dark compared to the other petal. Apart from that, I followed the same order as before. After blackening out the darkest areas with the crayon, I applied the pencil and went over it with a brush. Be aware to leave a little bit white space between the shadows and the petal's edge. Then I worked on an area of the rose being located so low that no light can reach it, which is why it turned out to be pitch black. Next, I chose one of the lower or outer rose petals, and even though it might have been wiser to fill in the shadows first, I honestly was too lazy to do so and decided to shade this one in completely. As before, begin with the shadow's darkest parts, which is in this case at the upper bottom of the petal, where another petal hovers above it, and the small area where the petal is slightly pushed in or crumpled. And now we are getting to the first very soft shadows on this rose. As you can see, I used the brush and just stroke softly over the relevant areas, using the remains of charcoal or from your pencil, which will inevitably sneak into the brush after a while. Also, I dragged the dark shadow at the bottom out by applying that technique. Then I added the remaining but lighter shadow on that petal's bottom and left that small bright space between the shadow and the petal's edge. And again, I smoothened that area out with the brush and dragged the upper shadow out with it until it met the light, almost unnoticeable shadow around the pushed-in spot. Next, I added the thin, softer shadow at the top of the petal, where there would be a very small fold or crease, before brushing it out. Additionally, I intensified the shadow and the outer one at the petal's top with the pencil and brush. Connect these two shadows by adding a few fine lines with the pencil and going over these with the brush again, moving it from the inner shadow's end to the outer shadow's end. To let the petal become lighter towards its top, I went over the lower third with the brush again. Last but not least, I took the black pen and cleared the petal's inner lower edge. Then I did another one of these pitch black areas, using the crayon and black pen, before turning to that prominent middle piece with a pretty deep, dark and large shadow. Again, I blackened out the edges with the black pen, added crayon, and for the first time, charcoal and a little bit of the pencil. Also, I drew several lines to picture delicate veins. Keep in mind to leave that right area at the top a little bit brighter than the left one, and a few smaller spots in between. Then I decided to complete the two petals we've already worked on in the beginning. I used the brush to go over the shadows of the upper petal once again and drag them further out towards the middle, before connecting the outer and inner shadows with each other by stroking a few times from one side to the other in a circular-like motion in several places. For a short time I switched to the lower petal and added charcoal to the inner shadow, which I brushed out. When doing so, leave this very fine white line at the edge again. So, next I turned to the previous petal and added charcoal to the larger inner shadow as well, to make it a little bit darker. Then I darkened the petal's rim with the crayon, before putting a layer of pencil next to the lower half of that black rim and brushed it out again, inwards towards the middle of the petal. Again, I connected that new shadow with the large inner one by brushing from one side to the other so that there remains this little bright area. Also, I carefully added a few veins on several petals with the pencil and smoothened them out with the brush before finishing the other half of that previous petal. Basically, you always do the same procedure. First, build up the shadows on several petals or optimally on all petals by working your way from the darkest parts to the lighter ones. Then you can work on the brighter areas and highlights, which are the white spots where most light would fall onto the rose, and smoothen everything out as much as possible with your brush. Use the stowaways in your brush, and yes, I'm talking about the charcoal or pencil remains, if you want an area to be very bright, but not quite white, or want an incredibly soft, almost non-noticeable shadow by brushing over these parts. If they don't turn out dark enough, add charcoal. Keep in mind that a rose usually gets darker around its center again. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it quite helpful. If you still feel a little bit insecure or don't really know how to figure out where to place shadows or bright areas where much light would fall onto a motif, I'd recommend watching another video of mine, in which I explain how light and shadows work in 5 minutes. So I hope you'll have a nice day. Thanks so much for watching and until next time. Bye!